Hey, Jim, and good morning. As a freshman delegate, one of the things that I was anxious to observe here in the legislature was how we applied the OPM principle. If you're not familiar with the OPM principle, OPM simply means other people's money. And the OPM principle involves analysis of how government views and uses other people's dollars. The enlightened approach, of course, is that the government would recognize and appreciate that these are, in fact, hard-earned tax dollars and only take what is needed, not any more. Accompanying these hard-earned tax dollars is the expectation that you will run a strong but limited government efficiently and effectively. That how you spend those tax dollars will be open and readily ascertainable, and those dollars are impressed with an implicit trust that they won't be wasted. What I observed, unfortunately, was far short of that ideal. At a time when fellow West Virginians are forced to tighten their belts and sacrifice, there's little evidence here in Charleston that our leadership was willing to do the same. Instead of using what we had already taken from the taxpayers, the legislature followed a disturbing tendency of wanting to take more. Rather than examining the pockets of money that have been swirled away over the years in various funds and in various reserves and in unencumbered and unexpended budget items, the tendency was to take more. For example, during the first and only year that I've been here, the legislature the leadership sought to raise unemployment taxes by $110 million. The Republican caucus resisted that. We located other funds that the government had already taken. We pushed back, and fortunately, with red faces, the legislative leadership took $40 million from what monies we'd already obtained from our taxpayers and reduced what we wanted to do from our business community to $70 million. The legislature is also guilty of sleight of hand in the case of the gasoline and fuel taxes. Rather than allow tax decreases to go into effect, the legislature sought to freeze the current rate, which was scheduled to be reduced in 2013, and raise the floor on the variable portion of the gasoline tax. And perhaps the most outrageous action this legislature took, at a time when our leaders are preaching to resist and fight with all their effort the Cap and Trade Act that the federal government was seeking to impose upon us, we adopted our own Cap and Trade Act here in West Virginia, a fact that's little noticed among most people in the state. And although that's not a direct tax, it is in fact, when the government makes it possible, in fact compels utility rates to go up, it is an indirect tax, and it takes hard-earned money from our taxpayers. Equally outrageous was they weren't satisfied after what they passed during the first session, during the regular session. We came back on our fourth special session and made it worse. Our goal in this agenda is to end the pervasive attitude of taking and squandering more of hard-earned dollars without being held accountable. Rather than taking more, we seek to reduce excessive taxes, especially those hardest hit during these difficult times: seniors, disabled, those on fixed income, working families. To make it harder to take more of their hard-earned tax dollars, we want to increase the percentage of votes needed to raise taxes, impose new fees from the current 50% to 60%, which would make it much more difficult. To minimize the need to take more hard-earned tax dollars, we seek to limit the growth of the state government and to monitor the efficiency and increased transparency of those dollars that are taken. We suggest to require an audit of all state spending, to reform the budget process to totally eliminate any use of line items that refer to unencumbered or unexpended categories and give no more information than that. To reduce waste, we seek to crack down on fraud and welfare entitlements, including imposing a requirement for drug testing for welfare recipients. Overwhelmingly, our constituents have told us they do not want to subsidize drug use. Finally, and equally important, we must be prepared to protect against the creation of additional burdens on West Virginians by the federal government. We must be organized and prepared to respond quickly to any efforts to expand the intrusion of federal government into the lives of West Virginians, whether that be the new health care legislation, cap-and-trade, or any other federal legislation that imposes either economic burdens or infringes on the freedoms that West Virginians enjoy. We propose to establish a standing committee who will be charged with anticipating such federal actions, informing the legislature of their options and what actions are being taken, and recommending prompt and adequate responses. Together, these actions will prove to our citizens that we do recognize and appreciate that what we're asking them for is their hard-earned tax dollars. And we will use those funds, we will prove to them that those earned tax dollars will be used efficiently and effectively, and by doing so, restore the trust of the people of West Virginia in their state government.
Thank you. Finally, we've also heard a great deal from our constituents about the fact that they're very frustrated that they don't believe government from Washington to Charleston is truly representing what their priorities are and what their values are. And we want to say to them that we recognize that this is their government and it should represent their values and priorities, and to discuss some steps that we believe can be taken to make sure that that is the case. I'd like to ask Delegate Patrick Lane, delegate from Kanawha County, who is the Vice Chairman of our Republican caucus and also the Vice Chair of our Minority Vice Chair of our Judiciary Committee, to come forward and share some thoughts in these lines.
Thank you, Tim. As you've heard, West Virginia citizens have noticed the recent explosion of government, both at the federal level and at the state level. Unfortunately, with the growth of government, it seems that legislative leaders have tied their allegiance to bureaucracy and special interests rather than focusing on the needs of the West Virginia citizen. The Republicans in the House intend to make our legislative agenda and this West Virginia government more responsive to citizens and more reflective of the citizens' desires. The key idea is to make West Virginia government serve the people rather than West Virginia people serving big government. In order to achieve this goal, we've outlined a few items that we believe must be enacted. First, we support initiative, referendum, and recall because we want to give you, the citizens, a true voice in your government. Secondly, we believe that creating a fair and unbiased judicial system through the nonpartisan election of judges is very important to the balance that needs to be brought to our court system so that citizens can get their fair share in court. Thirdly, promoting integrity and ethical conduct by government officials through a comprehensive ethics reform. Fourth, promoting family values held by the overwhelming majority of West Virginians by adopting the traditional definition of marriage. And finally, enhancing the accountability of your government officials by requiring 100 single-member districts in the House of Delegates. By adopting these proposals, West Virginia government will be more reflective of the desires of West Virginia citizens and, more importantly, more responsive to West Virginia citizens' needs. As you can see from the entire agenda that we've laid out, the West Virginia House Republicans are committed to government reform which place the citizens first by creating a climate where jobs can be created, making efficient use of tax dollars, and ensuring that government serves the people rather than the people serving government. It's clear from our agenda that West Virginia Republicans put West Virginia families and workers first and ahead of special interest and big government bureaucracy.